Hey guys, this is Captain John with Tailhunter Outdoor Adventures. Today, Jim Mannis and I are going to talk to you about some fly line rigging, some of the do's and don'ts and some of the problems that we saw over all the years while we were in the fly shop. So let me get Jim to say hi.
Hey, hi, how is everyone?
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I didn't have you in frame, Jim. So this is Captain Jim Mannis. He used to work at the Fly Fisherman with me, and I got to teach him how to rig fly lines. So today we're going to go over some stuff to help you learn how to rig it. All right. The first thing we're going to show you is this is a new fly line that I purchased. And as you can see, it has a factory rigged welded loop. So this factory rigged welded loop was something they started doing to make it a little easier, so if you weren't at a true fly shop, you didn't have to worry about fly line rigging. It came in the box and you could just stick it on your rod and reel with a loop-to-loop connection. So we're going to go over how this is okay for a very brief time. But like when Jim and I get a line, the first thing we do is we cut these off and actually put our own in, rig it ourselves. So and the main reason why is you can see how thick, let me get it over here where we can see it just a little better. You can see how thick that doubled over welded area is and how long it is. So what happens over time, right in the back of this weld here where it attaches to the head of the fly line, it'll start hinging. It'll crack and it'll start hinging. And you'll find out that you start having a real hard time getting that fly line to turn over properly. It just doesn't, it wants to hinge and just kind of flop to the side instead of actually casting right. So as you're transferring that energy, instead of rolling nice, it'll just kind of hinge and flop over and then your leader will collapse. So we're going to teach you how to avoid that and just go over a couple of things here. So the first thing, we're going to cut that loop off. We're going to take our scissors and we're going to go right to the back here and we're just going to cut that loop off. Get rid of that. Don't need it. Goodbye. All right. Pull my fly line up here so I can see it. Now, this was actually a line that I bought. It's a Cortland line that I bought that had that loop on it. So there's two ways we can rig this. We can, if a person wants, we can make our own loop in it, which is the first thing we're going to show you how to do. We're going to show you how to whip finish a nice small loop that's nice and tapered, and we'll actually go through the guides easy, but over time it won't get that hinge point and it won't crack. So we'll get set up here and we'll show you how we're going to do that. All right guys, so we're going to show you how to do this loop-to-loop connection without that factory loop. Again, there's the factory loop that we've cut off, so we just have the head of the fly line. And the first thing we're going to do is Jim's going to double that fly line over. And then we're going to use some 10-pound mono, and we're going to do a speed nail knot to secure that loop. You can do a speed nail knot, you can do a regular nail knot, whatever you want to do. Pull those down snug, make sure those wraps are nice and shouldered. All right. So you can see, now we have a much smaller loop But more importantly is going to be what's on the back end, all right? Because you're not going to have this great big doubled over bulky section like this has from the factory. All right, so he'll trim those tag ends off the mono. Now, next step on that tag end of your fly line, where that loop is, you want to mash it down kind of flat. So I'm going to give him a pair of pliers, and you see that little tag end, just kind of mash it down flat. And then we're going to cut that tag end at a tapered angle. And that's just going to allow, because what we're going to do is we're going to whip finish this tag end to the fly line so it goes through the guide nice and smooth. And that just allows it to be really nice and smooth and tapered as it goes through. So he'll take his thread now. Few wraps to get it started. And then this becomes the don't punch yourself in the face with the thread bobbin. Swing it around, and as you're swinging it around like this, you're moving it with your thumbs down that fly line towards the back end. So it takes a little practice. Some people will hand wrap it, and that's fine. You can hand wrap it. I will say, if you learn to do it this way, it's a lot smoother as far as your taper. The thread doesn't twist and it remains nice and flat, so it's just a little smoother. Gives it a little more professional look. So you're going to go just behind where that taper on the tag end was, and look how smooth that is. All right, and then we're going to work back up again, so you'll have two layers basically. So you're going to go down and then back up with your thread. All right. And then when you get to the very front, you're going to whip finish it. Just like you would tying a fly. Usually 3 times is good. And then you can cinch it down. And then I'll usually do a second one, just to make sure. This is all kind of icing on the cake, so to speak, because with that speed nail knot, the rigging can't go anywhere. It's not going to break on a fish, even if you don't have the thread to finish it off. So now he'll trim the thread away. And then this is our end with our loop. I mean, guys, it's hard to get much smoother than that. Nice and smooth. That's going to go through the guide, just no problem whatsoever. Won't give you any hinge points. I have thrown loops like this for probably 6 years at a time, never re-rigging them, and they never hinge. All right. So we're going to finish this by coating our thread. We just kind of want to seal that thread and keep it from getting wet and cut up and stuff. So there's two ways we can do this. The old way is we would take acetone, clean all the wax off that thread, or you can use non-wax thread. Get all that wax off there. Then we would put some head cement on it, let it dry good, and then we would coat it with Sally Hansen Hard as Nails. And we'll show you that whole process right here, and then I'll show you something you can do that knocks away all the extra work. All right, so as we said, now we're gonna clean this wax thread with some acetone. Just kind of brush it on there, and then we're going to take a Q-tip and kind of run across it. And it just, like I said, it just gets that wax off and lets some of the glues and head cements soak in just a little bit better. All right, so then we're going to coat it with some head cement. All right, so we're going to coat our head cement on here. And just real light, doesn't have to be real thick. Just get it on those thread wraps. All right, then we're going to let it dry. So we'll come back after it dries. Okay, so took about 3 or 4 minutes. It's all nice and dry. So now we're going to put our coating of Sally Hansen Hard as Nails. We've used this product for a long time. Seems to be relatively bulletproof and does a really good job at self-leveling. You don't want to put on real thick coats of it, but you're going to do a couple of coats of it. So you'll do one, and then we'll stick it back in our handy-dandy nail dryer here. And we'll let it dry. All right, guys, so we have finished our coatings. And as you can see, there is our rigged fly line. I'll have Jim rotate that towards him just a little. All right, so there's our finished product. You can see how nice and tapered it is. And again, you don't have that big bulky tapered section and a nice small loop. So, what's the positives of a loop-to-loop rig? Well, a couple of things. First off, for those people that need to change out leaders a lot and they don't have the ability to tie leaders on the water, loop-to-loop connections work great because you have a lot of your pre-tied leaders that people use have a loop connection in the back, a little perfection loop, and they're just simple to loop in and out. So changing them is nice and quick. Second thing is, because of the way we've tapered that and as small as that loop is, it's going to go through those guides real easy. And there's not a lot of bulky weight in the back, so it's not going to get that hinge point. It's not going to crack the coating and ruin the fly line over time. It's coated, so it's nice and durable. Like I said, I've been able to fish these in salt water up to 7-8 years without having to re-rig them. Now, we're going to go over one little aspect here, and that is your thread color. You can see we used blue here. And we used to have a rule at the shop when we rigged. We said, red to the reel, blue to the water. And people thought that was just our color combination to make it easy to remember which end goes to the reel. And at one point it was. But the other thing is, don't ever use a dark color on the front of your fly line. Especially red or black, brown even, those darker colors. I'm not worried about spooking fish, but what will happen if you use red or black or some color that looks like any marking on a bait fish that shows up really, really well in water, when you start throwing that into a school of jacks or ladyfish or even redfish, they will key in on that color and they'll actually come up and hit the fly line. And if you've got something like jacks with their teeth or say Spanish mackerel or something like, they'll actually cut through the fly line. So we used blue, tend to attract attention a little less. It blends into the waters real well, so we didn't have that problem. Now I won't say I've never had the problem, because I actually have had redfish come up and hit it. Don't know why, but for some reason they keyed in on the blue instead of letting me strip by them. But they never cut it in half, and I've never had a jack or a ladyfish hit it. Just a couple of crazy redfish. So the next thing we'll do is we'll show you a quick, proper way to make sure your loop-to-loop connection is done. All right, so we're going to do a proper loop-to-loop connection. We've got the whip finish loop in the fly line. We have a perfection loop into the leader, the butt section of the leader. So now we're going to put these together. So you're going to take the leader and pass it over the fly line. And then you're going to take the tag end of the leader and put it through the loop of the fly line. And then we're going to slide them down. And the biggest thing I tell people about loop-to-loop connections, keep the loops as small as possible. And make sure when you're cinching it down that it's grabbing side to side like this is. All right, you can see a nice kind of square knot connection. All right. And as that pulls down, it's not going to hinge over into the tip of the fly line and cut through it if a fish is pulling hard. So there's your final connection. The loop-to-loop connection. Talked about it. Makes it easy to quickly change out leaders when we need to. Done right, it gives us a nice smooth energy transfer. You can kind of see how that forms a nice smooth transition of energy as it unrolls. The big ones that come from the factory, a lot of times, like I said, they'll work fine in a pinch. If you have to use it because you don't have a way to re-rig it and you're going straight to the water, they'll work fine for a little bit. But over time, they will develop that crack where that bulky area meets the fly line. And then instead of being that nice smooth transition, it just kind of flops over, kicks over. Majority of the time your leader won't even unroll, it just kind of piles down. Jim and I use this a lot. There's some fly lines that's the only way you can rig them. A lot of your sinking tips, stuff like that, you can't get to that core, you can't do a needle nail knot or the nail knot that we're going to show here in a little bit. So you have to use a loop to loop. Nice tight loops, that's a major thing. Leaders, 10 foot, turn over relatively well. You get into some longer leaders, you can have a little problem because sometimes it doesn't want to transfer that energy as well.
Especially when you get to those 15-foot leaders for the bonefish down in the Keys.
Yeah, you start getting into 12 and 15-foot leaders, and what I tell people is the smaller this area of transfer can be, the more energy is going to transfer, or the more full energy is going to transfer. And I know there's probably some people out there that can tell me exactly how much energy is lost in a loop-to-loop connection. But let's say it's a 20% loss of energy, So now you're only hitting 80% into this leader. So for 9 or 10 feet, 80% may be enough to get that fly to roll over and land right. 15 foot may only get it to 10 foot, 11 foot, and then it just kind of piles up at the end, which is what you see. So that's where we'll use the nail knot that we'll show next. And that's a connection, it's kind of a permanent connection. but it transfers, you know, say instead of losing 20%, you probably only lose 5, maybe 10% if it's done right. So, you know, it makes turning those long leaders over a lot easier.
Sure does.
All right.
Much more efficient.
So we will show that one next, folks. All right, guys. So the first rigging we showed you was the loop-to-loop connection. Now I'm going to show you the connection that I use a lot of times because I'm fishing longer leaders, and it's a good way to get that energy transfer more efficiently and more smoothly. So this is our fly line. This is the head of the fly line ready for rigging. Cut off a factory loop that was on here. So the first thing I'm going to do, now you'll see a lot of people that will do a nail knot right to the coating of the fly line. If you're fishing panfish, maybe some small stream trout, stuff like that, knock yourself out. Nail knot it right over top of that core or the coating on the fly line. If you're fishing saltwater fish, you're fishing big largemouth bass, any fish where you have to apply a lot of pressure to stop them, keep them from getting back to cover, if you do a nail knot over this coating on the fly line, especially on the floating line, what's going to happen over time, and it could be as simple as the first fish, or it could be 5 or 6 fish, it's going to peel that coating off like a banana. And your whole leader will go shooting out into the water with the fish attached and the fly attached. So the first thing to keep that from happening, I'm going to take some 12-pound mono here. I'm going to put it over my coating, and I'm going to pull that down nice and tight. Take the handy dandy rigging pliers, grab a hold of that. Now, you saw how easy that just went? And there goes the whole coating of my fly line. So, I really didn't have to pull hard. It's just the fact that once you cut through that coating of the fly line, it slides off the core like nothing. And if that's what your leader's attached to, goodbye fish. So now what I have is I have the core of my fly line. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to do a double overhand knot. And I'm going to slide that double overhand knot down just past the area where I peeled that coating off. All right. Then I'm going to take my bodkin here. I'm going to open this area up with the 2 overhand knots. Okay. This does not have to be real smooth right now. I'm prepping this for my leader to get through. Some of these cores can be a little difficult because they're so stiff. Just get that bodkin in between it and open up those 2 loops that were formed. Just like that. All right. Now, I'm going to take my 40-pound. I'm using 40-pound because this is an 8-weight. So I want 40-pound for my butt section. I'm going to take my 40-pound, and I'm going to feed it from front to back through those 2 loops that were made by that double overhand knot. Just like that. And I'm going to pull it down where it's running parallel to my fly line now. All right, now listen, don't be chintzy. Give yourself plenty of rigging room. Mono's not that expensive. So I'm going to give myself plenty of line here. Now that I've got that fed through there, I'm going to take my pliers And I'm going to cinch down this overhand knot really well. And I just want to keep it right against the tip of the coating. Basically, that double overhand knot is a stop knot for me. All right. Cinch it down really well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go behind that stop knot and I'm going to do my nail knot. Yes, it is going on top of the coating. And I know I just told you don't put it on top of the coating, but that's because I don't want it on top of the coating with no stop knot in the end. Get everything situated and we'll do our nail knot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Make sure they're nice and shouldered. I got a flat spot on that line where my pliers cut it. Let me get rid of that little flat spot. It'll go through a lot smoother. All right. So now I'm going to pull it down. I don't want to tighten it all the way. All right. I'm just going to pull it down where I have control of that nail knot. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of feed it down the fly line, little at a time, until my nail knot is right behind that stop knot. Once it's behind that stop knot, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull it down. We picked up some trash. Get rid of the trash. Right, we had a little cell phone interruption. That's always what happens when you're trying to do these. So again, we're going to pull these down nice and tight. And as you can see, my nail knot is now right up to that stop knot. All right, now I use pliers here. And just make sure I cinch this down 100%. Like that. You can see that nice tapered nail knot now. Then we're going to go in and cut our tag ends off. All right, guys. So there's our connection. Now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to seal this connection with some UV knot sense. And it makes it a little smoother going out because I'm going to kind of taper it like a lead weight, like a football weight, so it'll be nice and tapered. So when that goes through the guides, it's just nice and smooth. All right. So we use some UV knot sense, and you can see I just coated it. And again, it just makes it a little smoother going in and out of the guides. So, and now we get that nice energy transfer of that connection. This does transfer much more energy throughout the system than that loop-to-loop connection. So this is the connection I'm going to use anytime I'm trying to throw 12 to 15 foot leaders. So hopefully these two ways, they take a little practice, but if you'll learn them, you will get much longer life out of your fly lines. Once this is rigged, I never have to change it unless somehow my fly line itself gets wrapped around a piling or a mangrove or something. This is a permanent rigging. I've got 5 feet of 40-pound attached to it for my butt section. I use 40-pound for 7, 8, 9, 10 weights. When I go up to an 11 and 12 weight, I use a 50-pound butt section. And when I do 6 and below, I usually drop down to a 30-pound butt section. And that's just because I want my leader to kind of match the size of the core material in the fly line, thickness-wise. So you can do that up and down as needed. I don't go below a 4-weight personally, so you may have to drop down to like 25 if you're doing a 3-weight or a 2-weight, but I don't go that small.
And John, how are we attaching the rest of our leader to that 40-pound butt section?
So our 40-pound butt section, when we're ready to drop down, we're going to do blood knots for every connection down. There's plenty of tutorials on how to do perfection loops and blood knots on the internet. So I'm gonna do a blood knot down from 40 down to 30. I'll run 2 or 3 feet of 30, depending on the total length of my leader. Then I'll drop down to 20, and I'll run another foot to 2 foot of 20, and then I'll drop down to my tippet material. And that could be 10 pound, 12 pound, 15, whatever I'm dropping down to. And by going in those 10-pound increments, those blood knots really cinch down well together and give you a nice smooth connection. Where if you try to drop from say 40 down to 12, if you can even get it to connect, which usually it won't, they'll just slip apart. The other big thing is once you go from a heavy line to a real thin line quickly, you lose that energy transfer. So you want to taper it. This is all about transferring energy through the entire system. So 40, 30, 20, and then I can go down to 10 pound. If I'm going to go below 10 pound to say 8-pound tippet or something even smaller, I may only do a foot of 10 pound and then a foot of 8 pound, 6 pound, whatever I need to go down to from there. So I hope this helps, and thanks for joining us.